Our guest today is writer-director Kyle Patrick Alvarez, who made headlines at the 2010 Independent Spirit Awards with the Someone to Watch Award, along with a nomination for Best First Feature regarding his film Easier with Practice.
Easier with Practice stars Brian Garrity as a confused young man embarking on a cross-country road trip with his slick younger brother to promote his unpublished novel while dealing with a sultry female caller, played by Katie Aselton, who prefers late-night sex calls to a real relationship.
The film has won numerous awards at festivals such as Cinevegas and the Edinburgh Film Festival. Kyle is currently slated to direct 2 other features, Girls and C.O.G. Please welcome to this episode of Film Courage, Mr. Kyle Patrick Alvarez.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hello.
Yes.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you here on the Super Bowl Sunday.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for delaying your Super Bowl activities to join us here in the studio, Kyle.
Yeah, it actually made me feel good to have a reason not to watch because I always feel guilty.
Yeah.
I had to remind myself last night who was even in the game. So.
Right, I'm with you there. I hear you. What was life like for you growing up?
I was born in Miami. I grew up a lot I grew up a lot. I obviously grew up. I moved around a lot as a kid. So I, lived in Europe for a while, in Canada for a while, and kind of settled in Northern California for high school and such, and always loved film as a kid. But I was never really one of those kids that has like a video camera in their backyard. I never really made films. I just watched a lot. So I would go to Blockbuster and like stock up on 10 VHS tapes, or remember that like if the movie was really long, it would have like the double case where they put the rubber bands between them. I'd always have those and just spend like weekends watching movies. And then once DVDs came out, just started listening to audio commentaries a lot and really doing that sort of early film school kind of thing, in terms of being aware of what was out there and trying to become sort of a cinephile. And then I went to film school went back to Miami for film school and went there for 4 years and got my my bachelor's in film and literature.
Having grown up in the Bay Area myself, I know that creativity is definitely encouraged there. And I'm wondering, did your parents foster that, or did they want you to go to school for more something like medicine or law?
Oh no, they were always really. My mom might be listening right now, so if she is, I'm saying hi, and I'm also telling the truth, even if she is listening. They were always really encouraging. I can't think of a moment in my life that ever once, that they were like, well, maybe this or maybe that. There was never any deferment, and you hear the stories of the people that do have that kind of difficulty from their parents or their support system, and it's, I can't even imagine. I mean, for me, it was just, it was never like I never had to think twice about it, and moving out to LA, I never had to think twice about it. It was always a lot of encouragement and going to school for it, and if anything, the only roadblocks were my own, just being like, maybe, am I nervous? Am I taking on too much? Am I, that kind of thing. But they've always been very supportive, so.
Great.
I'm still just loving the fact that we have Kyle here in studio. This is fantastic.
Love it.
Kyle, which of these traits would you say rates higher in your DNA? Luck or hard work?
Hard work. Hard work, definitely hard work. I mean, I can't remember the quote or who said it, but it's like luck is the combination of hard work and patience, or hard work and, and it's like building that, trying. I've always thought, and I haven't been in Los Angeles too long yet, but I've always thought, okay, what can I do? There's so many people out here trying to do the same thing. So what can I do to try to, it was like, okay, a lot of people move out to LA. Okay, well, not everyone who moves out has a script, or not everyone who moves out has a film. And like all of that, just trying to be like, okay, I really just want to keep on working and trying hard to do that. But at the same time, I'd be, lying if I said that good things didn't, I mean, it was a lot of it's timing and, finding Brian for the lead of our film and him being the right guy, and 6 months later, the Hurt Locker, 6 months after our movie plays, the Hurt Locker winning Best Picture, that kind of thing. Like, none of us knew that was going to happen. So, some of those things like that help bring attention and exposure are sheer luck, and you can't really plan for them. You can just sort of set the path to hope for that kind of luck. So,
Right.
And you mentioned sort of becoming a cinephile. You mentioned go to the University of Miami for film school. But at what point did you know, like, this is something I want to do? Like, I want to be a filmmaker.
It's usually in editing, it's never in production, so I can remember even when I was making my first film, I mean, to say, I always wanted to make films, it's like, okay, I always wanted to be in film, and I think, your natural inclination is to say, I want to write and direct, but, you don't really know until you do it if you really really like it. And I remember my first film, the production was like, it was just like two of us, and we had to like shoot on one of those like 3-lens Bolexes, and it was like film, and it was we had to spool the film. It was so complicated. We had all these extras, and it was really like stressful, like the 3 days we shot the movie on. And I just remember being like super overwhelmed by it. But then when we had the footage and editing, and we were like putting it together, and it's like the first time you actually see like a continuity. It's like the most simple things were like so exciting to be like, oh, he reached through the frame, and then we cut to the insert, and you see the hand, and it grabs the watch, and it was those kind of things where it was like, works like a real movie. And it was, I remember that being like, oh, and I'm still that way. Like I still just look forward to the day of being in the editing suite and like putting it together. You know, the production is always, it can be so challenging and stressful, and sometimes it's nice to just end up back in the dark room, like the same room where you wrote the script, and then back there being like, okay, we have this footage. And every time I get there, I'm always so happy. And I love production too, but I can remember on my first film when we started cutting, I was like, okay, I actually really like that. I love doing it. It's playing around, but it can be a career sometimes. So
let's go back to your arrival in LA. What were your notions coming here? Did you plan out what were you going to do, or were you simply thinking, you know what, I'm just going to come to LA and kind of land something? I don't know what it is, but I'll find it. Are you a by the seat of your pants kind of guy, or are you more a methodical planner?
I'm now more methodical. Now I'm like, okay, I'm trying to think like 4 films ahead. I'm trying to like lay out as much as I can. When I first moved out here, I had a little bit, you know, I come from, you know, my parents are immigrants, and we grew up always working. You know, it's my mind state has always been, you work really hard, you work every day. You know, that's how I am. But in some ways, the film industry isn't like that. You don't really work your way up in some ways. You don't, you know, unless you're going to try to be a producer or an agent. Then yeah, you start as an assistant, you work your way up. Maybe not even a producer nowadays, but you know, in that way you do. In that way, it follows a traditional business mold. But as you guys know, you just have to go and actually make something. It's the only way that. You have to go from step 1 to step 100. But I didn't. My natural inclinations were, I'm going to move out to LA. I'm going to get whatever job I can. It's going to be getting my foot in the door. And I would still encourage people to do that, but to also know your limits. Because I was a runner for so I moved out here. I just, you know, didn't have a job or anything, and got a job as like a runner for a production company. And for 6 months, I was basically just in my car all day long, picking up film at FedEx. I mean, at the FedEx, like at the airport. Like I had to wait for the plane to come in and watch the film, because they were shooting in New York but processing it here, and I have to drive from LAX all the way back into Hollywood, back to the production offices, back. So I was like, wait a second, I'm not even, you know, and it wasn't the kind of office where they were going to be like, oh, you paid your dues, now we're going to give you this step up. And I had other people that I knew that worked there for a long time, and now, you know, you have to be but some people get that kind of job where your boss is great and they want to see you succeed, and they don't want to just, it's this weird thing where like if you're a really good assistant, sometimes they get really comfortable with you being a good assistant and don't want to lose you. And I get that, but on some ends but you hear other stories that are totally different. But for me, my first job as a runner, I was just like, I'm not learning anything, and it was a little abusive, and I mean, not like physically abusive, but it was like I was coming home like just depressed. And
I've had those jobs.
Yeah. And so I left that job, and it was the first time I'd ever quit anything in my life. You know, it was like a year commitment, and after 6 months, I was just like, I can't do this. By the end of this, I won't be happy. And that was actually a really smart thing that I did. And then it was really good for me, because it was like a standards thing. It was like, no, I want to do more than this. I want more experience or exposure. And I'm not saying, oh, quit your job. I'm just saying, know when your foot is in the door to nudge the door open, or if it's just getting hot and sort of slammed against the door. And
right.
And my second job was I was an assistant for Warren Beatty, and that was a much better experience. I mean, totally different world of you know, of what I was learning and the experience I was getting versus the work I was putting in.
And that was the next question. How did you end up going from that job, and how did you get this assistant job for Warren Beatty?
Sheer luck. Once again, talking about hard work and luck. I mean, I knew someone that was an old friend of his, and they introduced me, and it was timing. You know, he was looking for someone to do some work for him, and it worked out well. And I spent exactly a year working for him in all facets and doing all different types of stuff. And it was a really good experience just to kind of understand how the hierarchy works, you know, in Hollywood, and who controls the studio, you know, how the studios are controlled, and not in a that sounds paranoid, not in a conspiracy kind of way, but just how few people really have a say in those huge movies. The big movies that we go to, the Trons and the Inceptions and everything. And like, who is that small sandbox of people that really make those decisions that guide the primary aspects of the industry? It was really interesting.
So from doing background on your story, now you're this assistant, and then you have this burning desire to make a movie, and I understand you hand in your 2 weeks notice. And you're not even sure kind of what you're going to do in that span of time.
Yeah, so I gave my 2 weeks notice, and I was just like, I just knew I wanted to make a film. I was like, even if I can just whatever it might be, and this is pre Kickstarter, pre all these sort of financing options, but it was just like, I just know that I need to sort of throw myself down the pit, because if not, it's just not going to happen. I need to make it, not just for my own desires, but like to survive. And so I left my job without a specific sense of like, oh, what movie I wanted to make, but somewhat by luck or chance, I'd never read GQ magazine in my life before, and I had some subscription, like a gift subscription to some magazine that was Condé Nast this is bringing it back to luck and hard work, and it got canceled, and so they filled in like the last 3 months of my subscription with GQ, just like, hey, we're sorry, this magazine went under, but here's GQ to make up for it. And I remember it was the August 2006, and it was Justin Timberlake on the cover of the magazine. I remember like, I don't even know what this magazine is, and opening up, and there was this article in there, and I read it, and I read it again, and I loved it right away. And maybe it was that pressure I'd put on myself, where I was like, oh God, I'm leaving in 2 weeks, I don't have a job, what am I going to do? But I was like, this is really something I could see. It was the first time I felt confident. Like I was like, I know how to make this story into a movie, and I know how to make it into what I feel would have been a good movie. And I'd never felt that before about a story, so it was really enlightening for me.
I want to read something that we found in IndieWire, and you say that you had this epiphany when you read the story in GQ, and you said, it was a surreal moment in which I suddenly felt an immense amount of confidence about how to tell the story cinematically, and also this specific determination to get it done. I was 23 at the time, and I set a goal for myself to be on set and making the film by the time I turned 25. I mean, that's amazing to me. What type of motivational prep work was going in your head at age 23? I mean, where did this gumption come from?
I really felt, I'd learned that from the runner job and the assistant job, and I know people who've worked much longer and much harder, in those kind of jobs than I did, so I have so much respect for them. And for me, it was kind of like, okay, I knew I had to, like I said, go from step 1 to kind of step 100, and for me, it was like, I knew I could tell the story in a range of prices, and budgets. We ended up with a relatively healthy budget, which was good because I had specific aesthetic things I wanted to do that just take money to do, in terms of shooting in cars and shooting on the road and so many things. But I also was prepared to tell the story with pocket change too, if I needed to. And that was why I sort of set that goal, like until by the time I'm 25, because I was like, if I'm 25 and I'm not making this yet, I don't really have much of a reason to not be making it, because I could go do this just with like a camera and a sound guy and some actors. And so it ended up not being that, but I realized setting deadlines is in some ways is kind of important, because then everyone else takes the project more seriously. They're like, oh, it's real, it's going to happen. And you don't want to ever lie and be like, oh, it's going to, you just say things I wanted to do, it's my plan. It's my plan to shoot it in 6 months. Okay, so what are we going to do? And even if you don't make that plan, at least people around you start realizing that you're serious about it and want to do it.
Yeah, I mean, you know how they say you put out your goal and the universe conspires to bring it in without sounding too, new age here, but it almost sounds too easy in some sense, because it's like the amount of people that come here in droves and they work so hard for years, and it sounds wonderful that here you get this great job as an assistant even. I know how hard it is. I've looked for jobs on Craigslist, and it's like you don't find those jobs listed there, and then to give that 2 weeks notice and have that happen, I mean, that's really, really amazing.
Well, and I really do feel lucky, because I know that our film could have disappeared into complete obscurity, and I don't say that in a self-deprecating way. I just say that in that, like, I've seen plenty of films that I've loved that have. I programmed a film festival this year and was fortunate enough to sit on the board of the Someone to Watch award that I won last year, so I got to watch all these films. And some were films that don't have distribution yet, that don't have any level of exposure yet, and not that we didn't get to play we didn't play Sundance or Tribeca or New York Film Festival. We didn't play any of these big festivals, but we still got a lot of exposure, especially coming to the Spirit Awards, and I realized that that I know that could have easily not have happened for us. I know that a lot of that was just luck. A lot of it was the hard work we put into making a film we were proud of, but another part of it was just the right people seeing it at the right time, and that may not have happened with that. And I know some people that it doesn't happen until their fourth or fifth film, and and it might still take me another 4 or 5 to I'm not necessarily in a place where I have offers coming in from studios. It's one of those things where I really it's still a lot of hard work, and I'm definitely grateful and don't take it for granted that people got to see the film.
Is there anything you want to say to those filmmakers? You're watching their films, they don't have distribution. Is there anything that you wish you could just say to those guys?
I would say just keep on making films. That's what I'm trying to do. It's just like I just want to even though some of my favorite filmmakers, are the ones that only made a handful of films in their lifetime, the Stanley Kubricks and Terrence Malick. Well, he's catching up now, but he, those guys that I love so much. I know for me in the place I'm in, it's like in the kind of work I want to do. I know I'm going to end up being one of those guys, hopefully one of those guys that makes like a movie all the time. Like is always making, someone like Woody Allen who's always making a film, and they're not always his best work, but you kind of respect the fact that he's a workman at the end of the day, and it's just two different paths. And so I always encourage the people that unless you have the patience and the income, just keep on trying to make them, because perseverance always wins out. Especially actors and filmmakers in this city always work. Everyone works so hard, and some people it hits them early, but then they lose it early. Some people it hits them late and they keep it for a lifetime. It's always a different path. So
right.
So when you give your 2-week notice, at the assistant job, and then I believe, you come across the Davey Rothbart article, and there's sort of a 6-month window there where, you're trying to acquire the rights from Davey. So how are you supporting yourself in that window of time, by, giving up your work? Did you have some sort of funds you were leaning on during that time?
I did. I was working as an editor, and actually the producer of the film, Cookie, she was creating a lot of videos for nonprofit organizations and corporations and such, and needed an editor. So I was able to pick up a lot of work and cut some NASA videos and cool. Just corporate video stuff that it plays at a convention, and then they pop in a DVD for whatever it might be, prospective investors and such. And so I was able to sort of keep going that during that time. Editing is a really good job to have, to sort of keep busy. Usually you can find some kind of jobs out there that pay decently, and you make your own hours, and you can work out of home, and it's a really good job to have if you're trying to write and put a film together. And a lot of filmmakers I know are editors in their off time.
Mm-hmm. And we're talking about making films, making that next film. Do you have any fear about not being able to make another film? Does that ever come into mind?
I think every single night I dream of not making another film. It's definitely, some days I feel like, I have like the world at my fingertips, and the other days I'm like, I still have to like dig to China. Like I'm trying to still work really hard. And I just try to remind myself, like I still have to prove myself every step of the way. You have to, and once in a blue moon it comes easy to someone, and their movie plays at a festival, and they get a TV deal, and they get a production deal with a major producer and such, and that's great, but you can't expect that or wait for that, especially in the way things are now. So I don't all I'm trying to do is sort of stay ahead of that and generate as much material. I'm trying to learn. I get too emotionally involved with projects too early on, and just want to get them made no matter what, which is a great feeling to have, but I'm also realizing I need to diversify. I need to have like more projects so that there's more of an opportunity for something to happen soon. I'm trying to do that, to write something that's really cheap, write something that's sort of medium, write something that maybe I could just be a script I sell. I'm trying to do that, but it's tough because you kind of have to put your mind in all these different places to balance them all.
And that's a lot of work as well.
Yeah, but it can be fun. Writing a script, can be quick. If you have the right idea and you're in the right mind state, you can write a script really quick. So,
now, Kyle, we remember you fondly from last year's Spirit Awards, and we were in the press tent, and we remember how you addressed the crowd, and you were very humble and gracious, and we're just curious how that night was for you.
It was really, really surreal. It was really wonderful. Actually, it's almost a year now since, and it was really, it's one of those things. I feel really, actually going back, I feel lucky. This year they're they're not giving out the award live during the broadcast. They gave it during a luncheon. I think in consideration of that, they're going to air like a 2-minute clip of the film that won the award, which in some ways is even more advantageous because you get all this, your film gets even a little bit more exposure. But for us, it was, a friend of mine invited me and I went with him the year before, and I just felt like, oh, this is so distant. You know, I had my film was finished and we were about to play at a festival, but I was like, this feels so far away. And it was really humbling and like overwhelming to be there and to go, and then to be on stage and trying to give a speech that makes sense, and also realizing that you don't want to be listing people off, you know, doing that thing. And it was odd. I don't really remember it. I kind of blanked out a bit, and but I was grateful that afterwards that they had like a thank you camera, so I could say thank you to like the people I I forgot to thank, especially like the guy whose life it's based on. So but then afterwards, and the press, it was weird, but it was a really good feeling, and I just felt really grateful for the, you know, exposure it gave the movie, and you know, the opportunities it gives me now to get my scripts out there, and you know, actors are more interested, and it's I've always joked that the only thing that the city cares more about than money is awards. And so I personally, you know, what I care about in the awards is how much everyone else cares about them. You know, like to me, that's what's great about it, is like, okay, now people are like, oh, you won a Spirit Award, let me read this script first, or whatever it might be, and I'm grateful for what that gave me, and I'm also grateful that Film Independent has managed to keep the Spirit Awards like a place for film discoveries. I mean, for Best First Feature that year, there were so many, all the movies there had done so well at the box office and everything, and for them to say, we're going to throw this movie in that no one's heard of, you know, or that so few people have compared to Crazy Heart and The Messenger and Paranormal Activity and such. I'm really grateful that they did that, and they've done that again this year, and that their nominating committees have gone out of their way to make sure that it lives up to its name of being called the Independent Spirit Awards. You know, that it's not just movies that were made independently, but movies that have been struggling and working their way up the festival route. I think they've kept the integrity of the ceremony, which I really like.
On a side note, we had Alex Holdridge, the director of In Search of a Midnight Kiss, on in 2009.
I just met him the first time at a Spirit Awards luncheon. I'd never met him before, but I like sought him out because I know Scoot from the film, but I never met Alex.
Yeah,
very cool.
Yeah, great guy, great interview, and you know, he won the Cassavetes Award at the 2009 Spirit Awards, and he mentioned that despite all the fanfare and hoopla that went along with it, that, you know, I think he addressed the crowd and he said, you know, I'll still be taking the trash out in the morning at my restaurant job, and I think they even put that in a newspaper headline, like, you know, Alex won't have to take the trash out in the morning, to which he did, and his restaurant manager, I think, posted it up. So in saying this, how was life different for you after the Spirit Awards, and how had really nothing changed?
Well, no, I mean, nothing really changed. Alex has a studio deal, which is great for him and awesome, and it's a great project. And in some ways, it's changed in that I've been able to go into some of those meetings. I have been able to pitch on studio films and you know, do my damnedest on them, and I bring in books and storyboards and do the whole rigmarole of I know I just mispronounced that word, of pitching movies to a studio, which has been like an amazing experience. Whether a studio project comes my way anytime in the near future or not, it's such to go in and try to describe to someone on these much bigger budget projects what you want to do, you know, has been amazing. And I do think the Spirit Awards but in the ways it hasn't changed is that I have my passion project, and I'm still pushing it, and I'm still, you know, emailing everyone I know. I'm still trying to find the money for it and dig it up. It hasn't been a golden ticket, but it certainly helps in terms of it's a nice thing to have in the first sentence of your bio. You know,
we have Richard Purvis calling in.
Hey,
and let's just see if we have him here. Richard, right. Richard, are you with us right now?
Hey guys,
hey,
I'm here.
Welcome to Film Courage, cool. Richard. Do you have a question for Kyle?
I do have a question for Kyle. For your first feature film, how did you find the casting process? Because the reason I ask is because actually I'm in the middle of the casting process right now for a feature film that I'm putting together, and in order to get the cast together, you tend to find that they say, well, do you have the money? And then you go to the money people and they say, do you have the cast and the sales agent? And then the sales agent says, do you have the cast in place? So I was wondering, what was your approach to sort of get past that unholy triangle?
Well, actually, I'm in the process of that right now with my project C.O.G, where everyone's like, well, who do you have involved? And then you go to the actors we want, we go to their agents, and they're like, well, what money? It's the same thing. It's this weird conundrum. On my first film, I specifically went out and sought money. I sought individual investment money that was non-cast contingent, which is really hard to find. And it was pre-economic difficulties, at least in the U.S. and it was a little easier to find. But for me, it was always really important that I wouldn't have to rely, and it's still really important to me, that I wouldn't have to rely on a big name or a star or something to justify the financing, because I think that's a little bit of a slippery slope and doesn't always lead to the best films. Sometimes it does, but not always.
Unfortunately, I have to agree with you, but I'm actually stuck on that slippery slope right now. So, oh well, never mind.
No, I wish I had a more direct answer, but it definitely. It's that honestly, that's the game. I mean, that unless you have a really specific, like a genre picture or a horror movie, because I'm kind of doing a thriller right now where casting isn't as essential to the profits of the film. It can be. I wish I had a more direct answer, but it was on my first film. We were fortunate enough to find the kind of financing that people that understood that we wanted to just find the right actors. But this time around when we need some more money, it is. We're trying to, what does help is if, I find that actors, if you can, it's about getting past their blockade. So if you can get them the script, I have a lot of respect for actors. They're usually really gutsy and they'll take a chance if they respond to the material. And I find, traditionally speaking, actors trust their gut. And so it's a matter of trying to find a way to get them the material.
That was actually going to be my next question. How much of your casting process was was basically personal contact rather than going through their agents? Because obviously that's the big stumbling block I've got right now, is the big blockade that is the actor's agent.
Yeah, that's well, on the first film, we didn't cast anyone who didn't read. So everyone auditioned for the film. No one got cast in the film who didn't audition. So that was just an audition process where we had casting directors and they sent the script out to the agencies and then they sent people in, and we just had big days where, dozens of people come in and read. On my film C.O.G. now, we are just, we're having to ask agents, and it is hard. We do have, sometimes it gets passed on and we get lucky. Other times we know it doesn't get passed on and we just get a rejection. And we do say, hey, we're trying to, and some investors, or producers will be like, oh, you have too many people attached. I wanted to be a part of casting. And for me, I'm like, right now, I just want to build as many elements around my film. So yeah, it's a matter of, sometimes it is a personal connection. I find the best is a combination. You go to the agents, you do the proper and formal thing, but then you ask around and you find out who might know someone who might be able to put in a good word for you, or at least get that person, that talent, to the point where they're going to ask their agent and be like, hey, someone asked me about this project, have you gotten that yet? So then the agent has to send them the script now, because if not, then they wouldn't be doing their job. So you have to sort of you do have to play the game a little bit and play both sides to try to succeed.
But it helps to be in LA to do it.
That's for sure, because what I've always said when people ask me, oh, should I move to LA or not? I'm like, I totally respect the people, especially like a lot of the guys in Austin and Seattle who are just doing their own thing completely and working with local actors and such. But otherwise, the advantage of being in LA is like you just go to someone's house that's a party and you meet someone who's an actor, and then you're like, oh, I kind of like that person. Maybe I'll do a short film with them, or you're whatever it might be. There's just almost to the point of exhaustion, everyone's involved in the industry. So the chances of meeting people or meeting someone who might know someone who might know someone who knows whoever is you raise your chance of that happening.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I have to say, it's exactly the same this side of the pond in the UK as well. If you're based outside of London, which I am, then you encounter the exact same difficulties. So it's nice to know I'm not the only one.
Yeah, it's true, and sometimes it's a matter of, really, I do find that actors respond to, if you have a film or a short, I've seen a lot of times that, name actors just, they're like, oh, I really like that short, I want to work with that guy. And I find that actors really are, I say that really positively, because, people can always say whatever they will about actors, but I do find that actors are really willing to go out there and take a risk if they feel it's going to give them an opportunity to do something. So it's just a matter of trying to get to them and finding a way in.
Okay, right. Well, that's great. Well,
thank
you very much.
Yeah, best of luck.
All right,
Thanks, guys. Have a good rest of your day.
Same to you.
Yeah, likewise.
Appreciate the call.
Thank you. That was Richard Purvez calling from across the pond here
Love it.
on Film Cards and LATalkRadio.com. It's great to hear the accent come in.
Love it. Absolutely.
And he's Nonsense Factory on Twitter,
Yes.
and we've had a lot of exchanges there, and it's great to have him call in here.
It's great.
If you want to call in, the number is LA Talk Radio 2 on Skype. Kyle, going back to Easier with Practice. And sort of this budget range that you're working at, it's somewhere, and I'm just guessing. You don't have to necessarily answer. I know it's less than $1 million. I imagine it's somewhere still six figures. But that's a lot of responsibility for a first-time feature filmmaker to take on that kind of money and sort of carry out this vision that you have for the film. What do you have to say about because you're not starting with just like a $50,000 film or cheaper. You're starting with it's a pretty heavy duty film for your first one.
Yeah, it was definitely intimidating, and definitely something I'm but at the same time that I was grateful that we got that experience of like the full production crew, and yeah, we were definitely under $1 million, but we weren't applicable for the John Cassavetes Award, which I think is under 500, I believe, or under 400. So that gives you an idea of our range.
I guess I was trying to get at what gave you the confidence?
Yeah,
that you could take on a project of that magnitude for your first time out.
I remember asking my dad, who used to be in business once, and was had to work on some big deals, and I was like, how do you deal with that? How do you wrap your mind around that? Mm-hmm. And he was like, I just cut a few zeros off the end, so it was kind of like, okay, I would look at it and be like, okay, this is a $50,000 decision we would have to make, like, okay, if it's wherever we're going to shoot, location, or the car rig, or whatever it might be, and let's just say, or 5,000, I'd be like, okay, if this was out of my own pocket and I had it was $500 decision or $50 decision, would I take it or not, as opposed to the just to try to make it relative and trust your instincts that way and still go off of financial and just always staying true. We made sure every penny was well spent, and that was something that was really important to me and my producer, to be like, we're not going to waste a penny. But it was really intimidating, and there was only one day we went past our the 12-hour like union mark, and we'd kind of planned for it. But I remember someone pulled out a chart and I saw it, and it said like literally every minute the money that was being spent, every minute that passed, and it was like, oh my god, and it was the one moment that I like had to kind of even go past the ADs and be like, we have to get this. It was back in film school. We were like, I don't know what we want to do. We just grabbed the camera and we're like, maybe we'll put it behind the sofa. Okay, move the sofa forward, and the sun was rising, and literally like hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars were getting spent every passing minute, and it was definitely stressful. But yeah, you just kind of have to lie to yourself and tell yourself it's not as much money as it actually is.
And you also kind of joke around that, you raised the financing for this film at a time where the money was there, and since the downturn in the economy. But how did you go about raising the money for the film?
Honestly, it was just a matter. I took a class at Film Independent. They have a lot of great classes, and this guy Stu Pollard, who's financed his own films and financed some other people's films, not him personally, but has found financing. He taught a class on business planning, and it was like, I think it was like 4 weeks, and you would go in. It was like 3 hours once a week, and he basically would go through and be like, okay, you have to build, this is your legal stuff you have to do. You have to build this. It's going to be this many pages. It should say stuff like this. And this is what you should look out for in terms of investors. This is what you should be wary of. And it was a matter of, and everyone there had projects in different ranges. Some people were looking for documentaries for $200,000. Other people were looking for features that were a few $1 million. It was all different, but the methodology was all the same in terms of, okay, the industry itself, and by that I mean studios or even the small production companies aren't interested in you. So where do you get that money from? And it's about networking. Really, was for me was just like, every day I probably send 50 emails to people just asking like, hey, do you know anyone? Do you know anyone that maybe has some money that's maybe interested? Do you know anyone that loves movies? Or like, if you're shooting in a specific part of the country, do you guys know anyone there? You think back on all your family or cousins or whatever it is. And I'm doing that now with my David Sedaris project, which is, it's like we're going to shoot in a specific state. So I'm asking I know I knew someone through someone who's a real estate agent there. So I email them, hey, do you know anyone? Here's our business plan. Here are my bios, and this is the script. And it can be disheartening a little bit because it is essentially begging, and it's a hard thing to do, I think, for anybody. Maybe not anybody, but it is for me. But it is a process of just being like hoping that it might be 5 tiers down the road, but that someone's going to be like, oh yeah, you know what, I have some money, that would be kind of fun, or I need to write some money off of my taxes this year, or I need some losses. And that's why it was easier back then, because people needed to get some money off their hands. Nowadays it's a little bit harder, but it is a part of like breaking through and just trying to find those few people, but also being careful that they're not the type of, you want to know where's your limit, where are they, well, does the scene have to happen this way, or can my daughter be in it, or whatever it might be. And you're always going to have to make concessions. You're never going to get perfect money. There's always going to be something you're going to have to say, okay, yeah, you know what, that's a small part, and we'll just put a little extra time in the shooting schedule to make sure that guy's daughter can deliver the lines well. I mean, you have to make exceptions, but you have to know where your threshold is of saying, I don't want to make this movie any more cheaply, or these are the things that are important to me. I won't change, and I'd just rather not make the film than make it with those things being different.
Mm-hmm. Especially too, probably outside of California, there's more chance of people being excited about something, whereas in LA it's just like, oh, okay, well, we know that there's fees involved, how much do I get, whereas probably other parts of the country it's different.
Absolutely. You usually hear about those kind of crazy angel investors, like those stories in the movies where just someone sits down and writes a $6 million check. I think that's how like Get Low got financed. I believe that was from California money, but they spent years and years, even with Robert Duvall attached, couldn't get the money. And the producer sat down with someone once, and the guy, at the end of the lunch, the guy wrote the check.
Wow.
He was like, I think it was like, as long as I can go golfing with Robert Duvall one day. And like, that's kind of what it was. And
I think that's what it was.
Granted, and that's Robert Duvall, but I mean, I hear stories of that every day, that just someone, but it's a matter of being sincere and being honest and just being like, film is a risky, I've heard stories of people going out there trying to be like, this is going to be my big fat Greek wedding, and you're only going to put in 200,000, but you're going to make 20 million. And it's just like, no, you can say that might happen. That's my opinion. I say it might happen, but it's a total gamble. You have to put it in. If we're talking about really offbeat projects without any major actors, without any instantly sellable qualities that are at risk, you say that could happen, especially now after Sundance this past year and all the sales, or this past month. But you also say, you know what, it could very well, you might not see a penny back, and you have to be okay with that as an investor. And if you're not, and it's you don't want someone needing their money back, because that's not a place. Then that's when you feel that pressure on set, or when you feel that pressure at the festival, and it starts to wear down on you, and you feel it's crippling.
Right. Someone taking out a second mortgage or something.
Yeah, to finance your film.
Let's go back real quickly to the festivals that you did not get into. What were you going through? What was on your mind when you were rejected by, was it Sundance, South by Southwest, Tribeca, and Berlin?
Actually, we never applied to Venice because by then we'd already gotten to. I mean, obviously Sundance and South by were the big disappointments, and we felt like, okay, I didn't understand it at the time. I didn't understand festivals and really how they work. And yeah, every once in a while, a film breaks through, but most of the films at those big festivals are businesses, and I say this respectfully because actually I've since gotten to know a lot of the Sundance people, and they work their asses off to try to get films they love in, but they're also running a business. So yeah, if it's got a movie star who's going to show up, like they've got and they owe someone a favor or whatever it might be, like the exposure is also important. That's how they can have the room for those films. So you're talking about thousands of films being submitted, and then you're talking about only a few amount of slots, because so many of those slots are taken up already by the films that are just gonna get in, no matter, even before they're made, they're in, and realizing those odds, how much, and I don't even say that, I always tell people, plan for Sundance, finish your movie in time by August to get it in, but don't rely, don't expect it, just plan for it, make sure your film is shot, make sure it's at least mixed so that you can follow the story, all of that, so you can get in time, because you have a chance at getting in, but don't expect it, don't be, because that for me, I did. Not that I expected it to come to me, but I really thought we had and ultimately the positive side of it was that the guys who run Cinevegas, where our premiere was, sadly doesn't exist anymore, were Sundance programmers. And they saw my film in the programming committees at Sundance when it was being considered, and when it didn't get picked up, that's when they emailed me for the film festival. That's when they emailed me and said, hey, would you be interested in this festival? And that ended up sort of being the saving grace for our film. So there's always a positive side to it. There's always people, those programmers, as much as you can be bitter about them, they care probably even more than you do about your film playing at the festival. So
we have time for a quick call here from Kathleen Donahue, who's calling in the Film Courage with a question for Kyle. Kathleen, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah, yes, welcome to Film Courage. You have a question for Kyle?
Yeah, I can fake an accent if you want, if that helps.
Which ones can you do?
Yeah.
Oh, geez. Kyle, I was wondering, you had mentioned that you had the biopic that you did based on a guy's life, and I was wondering if you ran into any problems as far as legal hurdles to leap over, because I'm kind of doing the same thing, and I wondered if you had his permission or if you had to get permission from other people, if in financing the film, if that was an issue.
Yeah, it's really complex. What happened was it was an article in GQ that was autobiographical. So I optioned the article, and then with that, in that legal paperwork, of course, it was the rights to the story, and it was his story. It is a really tricky thing, and I made the mistake of signing it. It fortunately ended up not being any problem with the film, but I signed a contract, this option contract, without having a lawyer look over it. I thought, I learned the legalese terms. I understood the contract, but it still was, no matter what, at the end of the day, even if you're asking a favor of a friend, if you don't always have a lawyer read something before you sign it, and understand the project. And, it is definitely a tricky place, and there's always going to be risks involved. But I did have his permission, and I did have the legal rights to his article. And I'm doing another thing now based on a short story that's also autobiographical, this David Sedaris project. And it's a similar thing, you have to make sure, this time I had the lawyers I'd worked with, that I now know, and they looked over it, and they, they're there to protect you in that sense. Yeah, definitely make sure there's someone helping you that understands it a bit, because it can be really tricky and be the kind of thing that you could get really far down the line, and then you realize, an important part of the story you're not allowed to talk about, or you have to change an important aspect of it to make sure it doesn't, but there's a lot of gray areas in it, and that's why I always encourage some kind of legal help, because both positive and negative. There's some things where it's like, well, if you change a name, you change a location and occupation, then they can't claim to be a part of the story anymore. But there's a lot of ifs, ands, or buts and awkward places in there.
Interesting. Were you advised to fictionalize any part of it because of that? Because of potential problem?
I actually, even just on a creative level, sort of superseded that, because it wasn't really anything historical. I really just liked the story. It was actually part of my pitch to the guy it was based on, that I wanted to change his last name. I didn't want his creative work. He tours the country with this magazine that's pretty popular called Found, and I didn't even think that needed to be a part of the story. So sort of part of my intentions, and same with the Sedaris project, were to just take the story and put it into a structure and build a film around it. So that sort of ended up superseding that, as opposed to it actually me being like, oh no, I want to tell a really true to life historical retelling of this guy's life. So I was already changing names and doing all those things just out of a personal place. So I never really came across those difficulties.
We're coming down to our final 5 minutes here on Film Cares. That was Kathleen Donahue calling in. We want to thank you, Kathleen, for giving us a call here.
Great hearing from you. As we wrap up today's show, now you're working on 2 other projects, which you briefly touched on, C.O.G. and Girls.
Yeah, so Girls is a project I wrote with my good friend Adam. C.O.G., I'll make it really fast because I know we're running. C.O.G. is it's a David Sedaris story from Naked, and David's always been really opposed to films. He's said no to films, he said no to TV series out of his work in the past, and for 10 years I've loved this specific story, and his cold feet has always been around the portrayal of his family, and this story that I happen to love, that I happen to think would make a great film, didn't involve any of his family. And so it took a long time. We were speaking about getting past agents and getting to the source, the real person. And it really just came short of me showing up at a book reading of his and handing him a copy of my film and saying, hey, I have some stuff I want to talk to you about, to make it happen. But it did take about 2.5 years, and I got the rights to that, and now we're in the process of trying to cast it and get the money. Like we were talking about earlier, I'm still going through that thing of, we don't have the money, we want to get the actors, so we're having to talk around the agents, and not around them, but talk to them and try to get them to understand, hey, just share it with them, this could be a really viable project. It's difficult to. And then Girls, a totally different experience, which is that we sat down in the summer while I was waiting for people to read the Sedaris script and said, let's just write something that can be cheap and fun and scary and we could make quickly, but still be really creative and ambitious and difficult to pull off. And we sat down and we wrote the script really fast, and thinking that we were going to have to raise a little bit of money for ourselves, and people responded really, really well to it. It was actually, we're talking about all this sort of stuff away from the industry and how difficult it is and how many things you have to circumvent, but this was a time that was totally different for me. I gave it to my agents. They read it, they really liked it, and they sent it out to like a dozen people they thought might like it, and like 3 of those people wanted to do it. I met with them, And then, one of them I got along with the most, and he totally got the project, and that's Peter Safran, who produced Buried. And now we're making the film in May. So, by the time the film is done in post-production, it will have been less than a year between thinking of the idea and shooting the film. And part of that is because it's a thriller. And I think that never underestimate the power of genre and that kind of exposure that can give you, as long as you make sure you're keeping what you like and about as yourself as a filmmaker intact, which I believe I am. So it's going to be a fun, simple thriller, but I think it's still going to have my imprint on it, and I'm getting an opportunity to do something completely insane that someone's trusting me to do, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
It's been an absolute pleasure having you here in the studio, Kyle.
And thank you for everyone who's listening, and especially the people who called in.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was Richard Purves and Kathleen Donahue. Thank you both, and also thought it was really nice to see Valerian Zamel write in on Facebook. Easier with Practice is an amazing film, all capitals.
Very cool.
We love to see that. Highly recommend our audience go back in and check out Easier with Practice wherever you can. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's on Netflix Instant domestically, and it's I believe actually it comes out on DVD in the UK.
Oh, very cool.
And I think on Valentine's Day.
Oh,
and I think they're holding a special screening in the UK, a special anti-Valentine's Day screening of the movie, because it's kind of a romance, but it's kind of not. So.
All right, well, we've been speaking with writer-director of the film Easier with Practice, Kyle Patrick Alvarez. For more on Kyle, please visit easierwithpractice.com, at Kyle Alvarez on Twitter, facebook.com/Kyle Alvarez, and on IMDb. Thank you again, Kyle, for spending your Super Bowl Sunday with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And David and Karen signing off from this week's Film Courage. Thank you for being with us again on this Super Bowl Sunday. And also, we could not end an episode of Film Courage without a huge thank you to our friend, tech engineer, and webmaster Ronan Rosner. Ronan built filmcourage.com for us, and he runs the board here at LA Talk Radio. And until next Sunday, have a great week.